Dear Espen, thank you for the generous introduction. Madam Secretary General, Ministers, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it's true that we belong to a very exclusive club of foreign ministers who've been defense ministers. But in the last few days, I've discovered that there is an even more exclusive club. Our new Irish colleague is simultaneously foreign minister and defense minister. I'd just like it to be remembered that when I was defense minister, I bought the first Polish naval strike squadron, which includes Kongsberg missiles, and we bought a subsequent one, and it's not our last word. I am particularly pleased to be standing here before you in this magnificent hall, because our ambassador tells us that this was the place where traditionally the Nobel Peace Prize was handed over, and one of the last recipients who received it here was Danuta Wałęsa, the wife of Lech Wałęsa, who couldn't come here in person because he couldn't be sure that the communist authorities would have let him back in. So for us, in that depth of the communist oppression, in the middle of Poland's lost decade in the 1980s, it was a very moving moment. It was a lifting up of spirits and a gesture to give us hope. We were, at that time in the 1980s, the poorest in our 1,000-year history by comparison with Western Europe. We've done very well since then, which proves that democracy and free markets work. Huh? Of course, the Nobel Peace Prize is of some interest right now. Prime ministers get letters. Our Speaker of Parliament has stated this morning that unfortunately he will not be signing the ready-made nomination paper for the next Nobel Peace Prize. Apparently, as foreign ministers, we also have the right to nominate. I'm on the record saying that if President Trump secures a fair peace for Ukraine, I shall do it myself. But it's I who will decide what a fair peace is. The relationship between Poland and Norway is in the best shape ever. I can't imagine how it could be even better. Last year, Norwegian air defense systems and F-35s were the first to help protect the Polish sky. Defense cooperation has been growing steadily and effectively. Together, as Espen has already mentioned, we are helping Ukrainian soldiers who can now train in Poland in Camp Jomsborg. This year, Norway will be the strategic partner for the Warsaw Security Forum, whose boss is here. That's right. I hope you come in droves to Warsaw. It's an excellent institution. And we hold similar views and concerns. I come here with a simple message. Poland also looks north. We are willing to develop our bilateral cooperation with Norway even further. I believe our countries have a unique role to play on our continent. Our geographic locations give our countries a strategic role in their respective regions with regard to Russia. And it even goes deeper than that. You know, Poland is between East and West. In the old days at NATO, they used to joke that God created Poland for tank warfare. We are trying to get away from that image. And we now like to think of ourselves as southern Scandinavia. You may or may not know that our Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, actually belongs to the Kaszebe national minority in Poland, and they were originally a Baltic tribe. So here you are. Norway is the oldest NATO member in the region, and Poland is the biggest on the eastern flank. We are both investing in our defense capabilities, and I would venture to say that our relevance is increasingly recognized by our American allies. Russian aggression against Ukraine and Russia's hybrid war against Europe continue unabated. Putin still believes he can win. Any misunderstanding within the transatlantic family, any distraction from our real security priorities, encourages him to explore our weaknesses and fosters Kremlin's criminal endeavors. Ukrainian territorial integrity and our own security is a long-term commitment. We support efforts to find a peaceful solution to the war, but we all understand that to have peace with Putin, we need to be united and ready to defend one another. Our strategic goals are straightforward: to keep our transatlantic community strong and united, to increase European NATO capabilities in response to the Russian aggression in the face of an inevitable shift in burden sharing, to address key gaps in regional security and around the Norwegian and Baltic seas. I am impressed with Norway's growing awareness of our shared responsibility for the Baltic Sea, as Espen was just saying. I appreciate your dedication, your willingness to participate in these efforts. Poland is at the moment in the chair of the Council of Baltic Sea States, and we aim to make the organization politically stronger by adopting a more focused strategy for regional security. And I know I can count on Norway's cooperation in this effort. With the impressive world's fifth largest trading fleet and the enormous experience in private-public partnership, Norway we see as a maritime superpower. I do encourage you to take a leading role in two areas. One, halting the growth of the infamous shadow fleet, which I prefer to call clunker fleet. Because shadows are harmless. But a fleet of very old tankers that don't fulfill technical criteria, that don't hold actionable insurance, and that ply enormous amounts of oil in a shallow, enclosed sea like the Baltic, is a present danger to the ecosystems and to our finances, quite frankly. Just to convince you how serious this is, I once, a couple of years ago, I asked the chairman of BP how much it cost them to clean up the mess created by Deepwater Horizon. Do you remember? In the Gulf of America, once called the Gulf of Mexico. The total cost, the rescue operation, the cleanup, and the payoffs, and the legal costs, $65 billion, half the value of the company. And secondly, we need jointly to provide assistance in the protection of maritime critical infrastructure. As you know, pipelines and underwater cables are being breached, sometimes on purpose, sometimes by accident, but we don't have the right legal framework for dealing with people who do this. The only way to defeat and keep away Russia is to continue degrading their energy sector and to limit the flow of resources to their defense companies. We believe in Alliance's principle of 360 degrees. We follow the developments in the Arctic region and share your perspective, enshrined in the already mentioned Norwegian national security strategy, and your new Arctic strategy. The Arctic is becoming a region of growing tensions. Please be sure that you will not be alone in facing this new challenge. Poland is no newcomer to the Arctic. Next year, we will mark the 70th anniversary of the permanent Polish polar station, Hornsund, in Svalbard. And we've just agreed with Espen that we would go and visit it together next year. Ladies and gentlemen, let me raise two more issues connected to security. First, economic cooperation. As the world's 20th largest economy, which Poland is now, we are ready to step up our cooperation in new fields, in IT, in quantum technologies, energy, space programs, and broader research. I'm also very proud to have learned from our ambassador this morning that the Polish petrochemical company, Orlen, is the 10th largest taxpayer in Norway. In the world of hybrid risks and trade wars, cooperation, innovation, and competitiveness are not a choice. They are a must. Secondly, Norway and the European Union. Norway is no longer a self-sufficient country on the periphery of Europe. Norway is not just yet another European country. You are a pillar of Europe's security. And in a world where long-established principles are undermined, we need more European unity. Rest assured that if you ever apply to join the European Union, I am confident in saying that whoever is in charge in Poland will vote in favor. Ladies and gentlemen, the last few years have made it very clear where our friends are, certainly in Northern Europe. The relationship between our countries is built on reliability and a shared understanding of our commitments. This allows us to plan for the long term and to act with confidence, even in an uncertain international environment. Poland has been and will remain your trustworthy and accountable ally, and we know this commitment is fully reciprocated. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to both of you for your statements. I now look forward to discuss the Norwegian-Polish or the Polish-Norwegian relationship. But I would like to start with Mr. Sikorski. I think it was in December I read an op-ed written by you. Where you started, it was called Never Again. And you started by telling us what keeps you awake at night. Would you care to share your nightmare with us here today?
Well, remind me which particular one I was... there are so many and the number seems to be growing.
I think it was the rule-based international order, and we can't start this conversation without, commenting a little bit on what's going on in the beginning of this year. It's been some strange comments from the other side of the Atlantic. You wrote about that this international order that, was shaped by the memories of 2 world wars and Holocaust.
Well, in Poland we are mostly Catholic, so we know that human nature is fallible, but and that we are sinners. But it's still nice to have the 10 Commandments as an aspiration.
Yeah. Exactly.
And this is how we think of the rules-based international order.
That's good.
There have been many breaches over decades, but it was still a reference point.
Yeah, yeah.
And now some people say that we don't even need it as a reference point, and that's a problem. We all know that the UN Security Council, for example, doesn't reflect the distribution of power in the world.
No.
Not a single African country, not a single Latin American country as a permanent member. India, 1.5 billion people, not on it. And, you know, with the invasion of Ukraine, a permanent member of a body that was charged originally with maintaining the peace uses its membership as an immunity from prosecution for an act of blatant aggression.
Yeah.
So sure, the UN, you know, is in danger of going down the route of the League of Nations. But that is not, that should not be a pretext for dismantling it altogether. Also because so many UN agencies do sterling work, UNHCR, World Food Programme, and many others. And also if you are proposing an alternative, the alternative should be better than the original. And that's not what we have at the moment.
No, that's true. Espen, would you care to comment a little bit? Are we into
as a predominantly Protestant country, but we traditionally take the scripture literally. But the other part of Protestantism is that you're actually supposed to interpret yourself. So there's some space for you know, discussing what it actually says. But I agree with you. I think, you know, we all knew that this was never perfect. This was also very central to Carney's very important speech in Davos, that it was a good order for many of us, but it was never perfect. I mean, that's good to say. But I mean, there are institutions that came out of that Pax Americana or global liberal order, which are worth preserving and adapting and modernizing. You know, the World Trade Organization, you know, either you have it or you don't, but if you don't have it, that's very costly for the world. You need to deal with that, but you also need to engage with are there some rules that has to be changed? We need to keep the UN, but also develop the UN. And the three core principles is basically, thou shall not invade other countries. That's a good rule, in my view. Thou shall try to cooperate economically when you can. And there shall be human rights in all countries. That's never been perfect, but the principles are not bad. These are good principles.
Don't change borders by force.
Yeah. I mean, the principle is good, yeah, because then and the connection actually between that principle and the principle of human rights is that there shall be respect for human rights within the borders, and then the borders doesn't matter so much. Far from reality, of course, but these are good principles. But we need, in the world we live in now, to really engage with how we can not only preserve but also invent and modernize and further develop after 81 years after the Second World War.
Yeah. Sikorski mentioned that Poland is looking north. And as Europe adapts to more fragmented and contested security environment, how central is regional cooperation in different shapes, but most definitely in Northern Europe, to Poland's overall security thinking, Sikorski?
Well, we traditionally have won and lost most, if not all, our wars on land, whereas your fortes are at sea and in the air.
Exactly.
Which means that we are complementary. And this northern dimension of our policy is that we are natural allies. So for us, the sense of threat from a Russia that has adopted an imperialist state ideology, for us, it's not an option, it's existential. And this is what binds us together. And when I talk about southern Scandinavia, I don't mean just the security dimension. I mean that this is our ambition, that's the kind of society we want to be. You know, there are threats to democracy, polarization, and so on. And it seems that smaller countries are better positioned to withstand them because it's easier to maintain trust.
Yeah.
And we also aspire to your social model, whereby the economy is free and competitive, but government is clean and social services are at a high level. That I think is something that unites us.
When I first time I met Thomas Ylvis, who was the foreign minister of Estonia and then later president, many years later become president, the first thing he told me, very first thing to introduce his position was that, Espen, we Estonians want to become like you, another boring Nordic country. And you know, actually, thinking back, it was not such a bad for exactly those reasons. So, but I felt that over these years being very close, you know, and many times together with Radek, but to see this developing Nordic-Baltic plus, and Poland included here, is that we learn from each other. You know, that the countries that came out of the Soviet Union or the Warsaw Pact bring with them a very relevant experience that we are well advised to listen to and learn from. And in the early days, that was seen as they hadn't really got the new memo of you know, harmony and togetherness and let's all give each other a big hug. But it turned out that that experience was actually quite relevant. On the other hand, the Nordics have also some experience, some sisu and some calm and so on, which can also be helpful. So I think we have mutually developed together, you know, building on these different experiences in our outlook. So it's much more than just a pragmatic cooperation based on day-to-day common interest. It's actually growing into something deeper. And we will be the first ones to say that we're happy that the formal institutions we belong to are big, like NATO and the EU and EA and so on, but to have this regional partnership for the long term is, you know, makes it stronger. So we're strengthening. I think this kind of cooperation makes both NATO and the EU stronger. And then one point of geography, if you're Russia and you want to sail west, there are three ways out. First one is through the Black Sea and out through the Bosporus. Whereas the Bosporus, thin line, NATO is, Turkey is NATO, can be choked very easily. Then there are two remaining outlets, that's the Baltic Sea and the Barents Sea, the Arctic Sea, and that's it. Otherwise you have to go the other way around. So if you're interested in what you call not the shadow fleet, but the
Clunker fleet.
But also the more sort of military dimensions, you know, being in control of these waterways is actually very relevant for strategic purposes. And as Radek says, you know, they have a traditional land focus, so does the Finns. We have more a naval and sea focus. Fine, because then we do things together that we literally become stronger together.
Could you be a bit more concrete? Because Sikorski mentioned that Norway is sharing responsibility of the Baltic, and we are, you know, more and more integrated to that. How do we do that concretely?
I mean, first we are literally in Poland because of you know, the and then we're also been involved in the work around this Baltic Sentry and rotating in and out of air policing roles and so on. But I think we have gradually learned over decades that we are also a Baltic country. I say in quotation marks because it's a little stretch to say we're in the Baltics. I remember Thorvald Stoltenberg, this only the Norwegian will understand, he brought the fylkesordfører from Østfold, because that was the closest to got to the Baltic.
Yeah. To the Baltic.
To a Baltic Sea. But the thing is that it's so important for our strategy. And remember, what was the Baltics and what is it? You know, 35 years ago, it was two neutral countries in the north. It was Russia and three other Soviet part, you know, the three Baltic states. It was Poland in the Warsaw Pact, and it was GDR, and there's a tiny bit of Denmark and West Germany. And now it's the other way around. The only Russia left is Kaliningrad and the sailing route into St. Petersburg. Everything else is NATO. So that has really changed, and so is our Arctic. So we need to understand that we're also Baltic. And our friends, thankfully, are also realizing that they are, in a sense, also Arctic. Not in a physical sense, but they should care about what happens in the Arctic, and that's good.
Yes, if you look at the Norwegian long coastline, it's the reinforcement of Allied forces will come there also, so that's important.
And the number one, you know, the most important conglomeration of nuclear weapons in our neighborhood is in Kola, and that's where the second strike capability is. If you don't control the waters, but also the land behind the waters, you will give them a free
That's
rein.
true.
Yeah.
There's also a longer history of your involvement in my part of the world than some people appreciate. Didn't Charles XII die besieging some Norwegian fort? He did, didn't he?
He did.
It's all his fault. Because if he hadn't lost the Battle of Poltava, everything would be different today.
Yeah.
But we took him
Poltava is on the way to.
extent.
For those who don't know where Poltava is, it's one of the last stops on the way to Kharkiv.
Yeah, but he died in Halden in Norway.
We took
Probably shot from one of his
It was
own.
a different government. That did
Yeah,
that.
it was. At least you were not defense minister at that time. No. You both
Not that I
have been
remember.
minister of defense. I think that's how valuable, or what does that do with your view as foreign ministers to have had the experience of being defense minister?
Well, first of all, defense ministries are harder to run than foreign ministers.
Yeah.
You have, in most countries, between 20 and 25 times the budget. But it also teaches you to be much more concrete and results-oriented.
Yeah.
They have also different institutional cultures. So at the defense ministry, when the minister says something, on the whole, they try to carry it out. At the foreign ministry, a minister's decision is an invitation to a discussion
Or a
about
seminar.
whether it's a good idea.
Okay. Espen, did
Okay.
you recall that from your...
Well, what I would say is that, you know, increasingly defense ministries and foreign ministries deal with many of the same issues. I see there's another former defense minister on the first row. But, you know, in defense you need to be at the strategic level, but you also have to make sure that very practical things happen. Not that you do it yourself, obviously, but you must ensure, because you need both to have a strategy, but you also need to know that there are batteries for the radio and you can charge them in the field. I mean, that whole spectrum, and that is more present in everyday life in a defense ministry than in the foreign ministry, and that's a good background, actually, that you have the things have consequences, but also to be in charge of the military. And of course, we are the CHOD. It's also a good experience is that it's an organization that has first it's there to fight wars, obviously, and to prepare for that. But also that if something, you know, they're trained to sustain themselves in very critical situations. So if somebody says that something should happen here, it actually happens over there because there's a chain of command, and they can, you know, you not only take care of the enemy, but also make sure that you're still around when you do it because everything else fails. So that's an experience which is a good background. I think. Yeah.
Sikorski, do the recent developments around Greenland and the High North change how Poland thinks about European security, interdependence, and its relations and dependency of the United States?
Well, we signed the Paris Declaration on Denmark's sovereignty. We make no claims on Danish territory, even though we had a war over Bornholm in the early 16th century.
Okay.
But speaking seriously, I wish the issue would just go away, because the United States has complete operational freedom in Greenland. Also in literally tomorrow I'm flying to Washington to a critical minerals conference that the United States is convening to try to see what we can do vis-à-vis this Chinese blackmail.
Yeah.
And of course Greenland is open to American and anybody else's effort to find these materials there. And we even had a concession, even Poland had a concession once. So it's an unnecessary distraction.
I would like to follow up. You invited us to the European Union and said that you or any future Polish government will vote for a Norwegian membership. But
I'll tell you more.
Okay.
Because I saw this excellent series about Norway called Occupied.
Oh, yeah.
Which, if you haven't seen it,
Yes.
is the evil European Union
Working with
getting the
Russia.
Russians to occupy Norway and collaborating with the Russians. Well, as long as I have anything to do with the Polish government, Poland will not participate in the occupation of Norway.
Okay, get it.
That's a deal. Yeah.
But to follow up on that, this morning I had a discussion with Kaja Kallas and our Prime Minister on Europe as a security actor, where Kallas and also followed up on Mark Rutte last week that the EU should not be a defense union. How do you see it from Poland?
Well, here you're treading on my sensitive nerve, because this subject has been a pet subject for me for decades, actually. But it's a sorry story. After the wars of the Yugoslav succession, in which 200,000 plus people died, we decided at that time to create a European intervention force of between 40 and 70,000 people, and nothing happened. Then the British, when they were still members, devised this concept of battle groups. And theoretically, at any one time, there are 3 countries that are on standby and delegate a battalion each to a brigade-size unit, which theoretically could be used in some kind of emergency. But they've never been used because the 3 countries would have to agree simultaneously, because they would have to pay for it, because the risks would be disproportionately falling on them. And we've promised ourselves in the Lisbon Treaty to have a common foreign and security policy, which is mostly not observed. On anything important, the largest member states act unilaterally or jointly amongst themselves. We have had some EU military operations, but very marginal. So there was a strike on some Somali pilots 15 years ago. There were some peacekeeping missions in Africa, but very, very low level. When I was a member of the European Parliament, I was banging on about it all the time. You know, what has to happen? Does Putin have to invade Ukraine for all of you to understand that we should not be defenseless? And I think this question is becoming more relevant at a time when our American allies are telling us frankly, we do not have either the capacity or even perhaps the will to attend to 2 crises simultaneously around the globe, and you have to take better care of yourself. And, you know, we had a legal mechanism in the Lisbon Treaty. It was called Permanent Structured Cooperation in the Area of Defense. Originally, Bernard Kouchner, the foreign minister of France, and myself, we proposed that we use it as an avant-garde method of getting together countries that are serious about defense, that are willing to pool their, to unify their rules of engagement, to really put their troops under unified command, to allow their citizens to serve in such a unit voluntarily, and for it to be under the authority of the Foreign Affairs Council, and for it to be funded from the EU budget. Because only then would you be tempted to use it. And of course it wouldn't be enough to deter Putin. But some warlord in Libya or some warlord in the Balkans, maybe. And it's I call it a European Legion, others call it, the bureaucratic term for it is a rapid reaction capacity. I think it's supposed to become operational this year, but I'll believe it when I see it.
But no, if I may,
Yeah,
because now
please.
that now there is I mean, Poland is already there, but there is a strong and I think quite realistic ambition by many countries, hopefully all, but at least by many, to have real significant defense spending increases in the coming years. That means much more money for defense. And one thing you take away from background as a defense minister is that money for defense can be spent smartly and not so smartly. So it's particularly important to be very strategic in how that new available money is being used. And here that is used, that there's more and that it actually get bang for the bucks, which also has to do with development of defense industries, including in Europe, and that it is used smartly and that it's used together. Because this is really the time for not trying to have a myriad of copies of each other, but rather specialize more. That's much easier said than done, by all means. But I think this is really the time to think about that. And whether you call that European or transatlantic, it still has to happen in Europe. So that might be a new opportunity with a new degree of realism of Europe needing to be able to fight in a higher level of crisis before the Americans will come substantively to our assistance, even if they're allies.
In the last session, I got a question from the audience about a kind of Nordic nuclear deterrence due to the different situation with the United States and the doubt of the security guarantee. Is Poland discussing to acquire nuclear weapons?
No, we're not. First of all, because we are in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and secondly, because nukes have shown to be useless in the Russia-Ukraine war, and thirdly, because Iran shows you that whereas getting a nuclear weapon like North Korea is useful, it assures regime preservation and is a deterrence, getting from A to B is very dangerous, takes a long time, and can ruin your country and prove counterproductive.
A Nordic nuclear deterrence?
We're not planning to build a Norwegian nuclear weapon. No, but seriously, I mean, nuclear is integrated, and it's a very integral part of NATO's defense strategy. And the stronger the credibility of the US nuclear umbrella, the less countries will be inspired to make their own nukes. That's true in Europe, it's true in East Asia, for Japan and South Korea. So preserving the credibility, the relevance credibility of the nuclear umbrella is essential, very, very high on the agenda. And frankly, there's not that much European. The French weapons are French. The UK might, in a sense, be European if the British want, but they're very American technologically anyway. So there isn't really, to be honest, very much of a European alternative to the umbrella. And NPT has to be remembered. And in the late 60s, people thought there would be 40, 50 nuclear states. It did not happen. And it's because of NPT and the US nuclear umbrella, because many of the potential candidates felt they didn't need to. So that's a strong argument that it's peaceful for the world to try to preserve a US
and
umbrella.
To keep NATO in Article 5, but we don't know if it's will be there in the future.
Russia has 6,000 warheads. Imagine the effort it would take to produce a response to that.
Sounds expensive.
But I would like to, Poland is a fast-growing economy and also a considerable military power use, is spending almost 5% of GDP on defense.
Which doesn't tell you what our status is. So minus the nuclear deterrent, our defense budget in absolute numbers is now bigger than France's.
Yeah. Exactly. So what role do you foresee for Poland in shaping a future security order, be it a European-Canadian pillar inside NATO with some American contribution, or be it in different coalition of the willing, or looking long-term?
We are a peaceful democracy. We just want to be left alone.
Yeah, exactly. But your geography matters.
But unfortunately, one of our neighbors has redeveloped an imperialist state ideology. and therefore we can't pretend that we don't notice it.
Exactly.
And of course, we like NATO as it has existed historically, for common defense. NATO is likely to be more reduced in Europe, reduced perhaps to the nuclear umbrella, to strategic enablers. And our American allies are telling us that we have to provide most of the muscle on land. And this is what we're preparing for. So,
But more, I agree, but more European muscle can also be NATO.
Exactly.
So, the US presence might go down and be, predominantly the umbrella, but you can still do much of the European build-up inside NATO.
Although I have to say it's sometimes frustrating when you hear the US castigating us for not spending enough, and Poland has been spending 2% for 20 years.
No.
We are now at 4.8%.
Yeah.
And it sometimes sounds as if the US is getting nothing in return.
Yeah.
Hello, isn't Ramstein useful to the United States? Isn't the missile defense base in Poland useful to the United States? Remember, the great majority of the US defense budget is not spent on the defense of Europe.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It is, we don't have a global military empire. We need to spend enough not to be as good as the United States. We just have to be better than Putin.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
that's perfectly achievable.
Okay, yeah. We have to talk a little bit about Ukraine and our common efforts to secure a victory for the Ukrainians. We cannot come in the situation that the most experienced army in Europe fall in the hands of the Russians. Could you tell a bit about the Jomsborg cooperation? And you built it very fast this summer, the Camp Jomsborg. How is the cooperation functioning, and how is this contributing to deepening our cooperation, Sikorski and then Espen?
Well, we've leased a piece of Polish territory to Norway, and we're very glad that you are developing a training facility there, which hopefully will be useful when the coalition of the willing helps to preserve the peace in Ukraine. Let's be honest with ourselves. When the Russians invaded, very few of us thought that Ukraine would be able to sustain this for 4 years.
Exactly.
I mean, when you take a broad view, Ukraine overperformed. Europe and the United States also overperformed. I thought we would I thought we would be lucky to get Russia cut off from SWIFT.
Yeah.
Actually, our sanctions have gone much further than that. And if you'd asked me on the day of the invasion whether the United States would risk its sources to provide Ukraine strategic intelligence to deprive the Russians of a plausible casus belli, that was actually brilliant and brave. We also made some mistakes, I think, in 2023, when Ukraine was on the march. The then administration deterred itself from giving them more support to try to win the war. And in general, we have rather been in the frame of mind of helping Ukraine survive rather than giving them enough to win.
Yeah.
And this is why this war is taking so long.
Espen.
Indeed, and Camp Jomsborg is part of that, because that's where we help train the new Ukrainian brigades. And I think a key question now in the ongoing discussions about security guarantees, the most important guarantee is the guaranteed continued support for the Ukrainian army and military capacity in the long run. I mean, there are other elements to it, but the first deterrent has to be a continued strong Ukrainian military capacity, which might be a somewhat smaller in number than while you fight war. That's also for discussion, but which of course needs the capacity to not only defend but also be somebody you don't want to attack from Russia's side, and then everything else comes later. So to focus both on how to get to a ceasefire, but also what it's going to look like after that ceasefire and after an eventual peace is very high on our agenda. And we can never, you always, you have to get to the future, but you have to think about the future as well.
Exactly.
And there is an increasing amount of shared energy spent on thinking about what is the post-war status of Ukraine, how can we help them after the war, and how do we deal with Russia when they're not tied up in Ukraine any longer. And that thinking needs to happen now. Because the final days and weeks of every war in history, a lot of things fall into place, for good or bad, and then you're stuck with them for decades. We know that from so many cases, and if you're not firm on what outcome you want, and it has to be more advanced than just stop the killing. That's a good goal, but that's not it. It has to be defendable, understandable, clear. There has to be, some surveillance. Somebody has to monitor, and you need to know what to do if it fails. Otherwise, it's not a real peace.
If I may just jump in, I'm really concerned about this because if we have a ceasefire along the line of contact, that's not a natural border.
No.
Ukraine needs defensible borders at the end of this process, and the line of contact ain't it. And if that's where the armistice falls, it's a recipe for another war.
But looking at the different, the US involved in trying to get a ceasefire or a peace negotiations, I think that Europe is always acting reactive. Isn't it possible to get some initiative from the European side first?
I completely agree with you. President Trump likes to ask partners what cards they have.
Yeah.
And the last two cards that the US has is some intelligence sharing to do with targeting, plus sanctions.
Yeah.
We are now bankrolling the Ukrainian state, and we are paying for the war. And yet we have to sometimes beg the US to even be informed about the state of their negotiations. That's not how it should be.
No.
And it's important when Radek says we, that it's we Europeans, but frankly, it is from Poland and Germany and upwards where you see the big numbers. So we're proud of being one of the countries that contribute much, but I'm worried that we shouldn't be so big on the percentage, as on the total percentage, because there are other countries that are also affected. So again, we're closer to the conflict. Poland, Finland, Norway feel that this is very existential for us directly, but we need to share that with the broader crowd.
Let's end with some positive signs. Minister Sikorski invited in his speech new economic cooperation with Norway in new fields. Do you have something to come up with?
Well, we're cooperating. There are, I think there will be more news about concrete cooperation coming up in the course of the day, to say that first. But there's also, it's a very fast-growing partnership on all fronts, civilian and military. And Poland is a growing, many countries have benefited of joining the EU. I don't really think anybody's benefited as much and as demonstrably as Poland. That has made it also a big market for us. And Radek said earlier today that we're compatible with, and this is also true for our economic partnership. So on all these things, there will be more.
Yeah, good.
But inside the framework of the EU/EEA, which means that we have a single market, and that single market is increasingly important to preserve. And we work with our close friends to remind them that the single market does not have 27 members, but 30. So please remember Iceland, Norway, and Liechtenstein every day when you get up in the morning. And that's always work in progress. Yeah.
And when people say they are half Scandinavian, we should accept them.
Bring it on. Yeah. There's space.
Your financial credibility is such that you don't need the safe instruments. But for us, it's important. It's 150 billion euros for reindustrializing Europe in the area of defense. And here we already have some important projects, and I am sure we will have more.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for a very interesting discussion and reflecting so openly on where we stand in European security today, and particularly to Mr. Sikorski taking the time to come to Oslo to our conference. And I hope you have had good conversation with others as well. And safe flight back. Yes, then
Thank you.
give them a big hand.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.